So Dan, when it comes to the total package of what a candidate will be receiving from an organization if they're chosen, um, where does housing come into play? Is it a perk or is it a requirement?
So funny. That is the actual $1 million question. And I think for folks that have been working in the industry for decades, they might see the housing as a perk. But the truth is today's applicant sees it as a requirement. And I think it's really hard for people to wrestle with that. When we talk about this topic, I think this was a big paradigm shift during 2020 and COVID and everything kind of being evaluated. And looking at it's hard for people to really wrestle with this. So this is a more relevant conversation for overnight camps, but we definitely have some takeaways for day camps at the end of this video as well. So I constantly reflect on Kath Davies, who's the camp director at YMCA Camp Hazen. She loves to tell the joke that a camp director will only grow as big as their housing, just like a goldfish. Like the same thing with a goldfish will only get as big as their bowl. And so now that it's seen more as a requirement and not a perk, I think for a lot of people, they're thinking about this question of can this housing support my family, even if they're single, even if they don't have a spouse, even if they never bring up children during it. I think when a camp director is looking at a camp now, they're trying to vision themselves there for quite some time. And can they grow into this housing, right? And just like can a goldfish grow in their bowl? And so what that means is it's not just space. Sometimes it's is the house in the middle of the camp, and or is it off to the side? Sometimes it's does it feel actually like a respite, or is it connected to the admin building of the camp, which I see all the time, right? And then uh, family again, we had this paradigm shift of about it, 5, 6 years ago, but like people are so much more connected to their families. Can they have guests visit even during the summer? Can their mothers stay at their place during the summer so they have somebody to go back to? And uh, all this gets nuanced. And what I see on the campsite is I see more camps putting in formal agreements or guidelines, and to applicants, it's actually reassuring because that is helping a good set of boundaries. So I do recommend if you're in a job search to actually have a set agreement prior, so that way they can actually review it and understand what it is. It's not actually a deterrent. Sometimes it's actually really helpful because they really know what's going on. And then uh, what also plays into it is can they live off-site during a non-summer? Often for the for-profit camps, they are very open-minded to this, but non-profit camps really vary, we find. And the more flexibility you give your executive director or your camp director, the better that will come off. But just so much of this is just understanding that they want to be able to be at that camp for a while, and they want to be able to see themselves growing. And in almost every other job, you can move without having to talk to your boss, but your boss becomes your landlord, even if it's a board, becomes your landlord during this time period, which gets very confusing for a lot of folks. And then on the day camp side, so many of these camps are in rural locations. People want to be able to raise their family, and does that rural location match what they're looking for in their life? If it's a non-rural location, can they afford to live in that neighborhood? That is the other aspect. I know of one camp that the search took a little bit of time because we had to find people that could afford to live in that neighborhood and wanted to live in that neighborhood as well too, with having realistic commutes. And so it's a very interesting factor when we start playing into it. Hunter, did you have anything that
Yeah,
you wanted to add in?
I love the goldfish analogy. I think it should target what a candidate is asking of us and what a candidate's asking of where they're going. I follow on social media, I follow a guy called the Goldfish Guy, and he has over the last year taken his commercial goldfish from his basement of his house out to he's built what he calls a goldfish greenhouse, and it is these massive troughs. And he really talks about, and I think it's really important for camp executives and directors to understand. He really gives them the space to grow and the room to grow, as you're talking about. Can you envision yourself being there long term? And the more space you have, the bigger you can grow, like the goldfish can. So it really is important for candidates to understand what is being asked and what is being required. because there's two parts to this. It's the yin and the yang. Are they being asked to live there, or are they being required to live there? And if they're required, is it a place that they really can see themselves for more than a year or two? Because you don't want to go into these roles for just a year or two.
Yeah. Yeah, and expanding on the requirement, right? I have a colleague, a friend that he lives in town. The camp is about 10 minutes from his house. He moves onto camp every summer. So that's just what he does. Up until about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, he started to realize that his team underneath him was well capable of taking care of any emergency. And often he started reflecting that was really not bothered at night in general. And so he said, it's not necessary for me to move. In fact, it allows for us to have more flexibility in our housing for our staff. So I'm going to not no longer move on site for the summer. So for some folks, that is not what they believe in. And they believe in being there every morning, and or being there through the night. And for other folks, they have well-established teams and know they could roll in at the appropriate time and still be present and still be there for everyone. And so that's where it gets a very interesting philosophical conversation. And the truth is that every applicant's different, and every applicant has a different home life and a family life or a view on privacy, and you really have to kind of look at it. But is it no longer looked at as the same perk as it was as part of the compensation. That's 100% regardless of the folks that we talk to.